Welcome to All About Art. My name is Alexandra, and I'm an art historian, curator, and writer. Within this podcast, topics relating to art history, cultural policy, the art sector, as well as a large range of other art-related topics will be covered. Conducting critical discussions, having entertaining exchanges, or just enjoying some relaxing chats, All About Art is where you'll find it all. Join me in exploring and developing cultural discourse. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of All About Art. This is a new format that I'm trying out. For the first half of this episode, I'll be giving a review of an exhibition, and in the second half, you'll hear a mini interview between me and the artistic director of the organization showing the exhibition. So let's dive in. Last weekend, I took a train out to Slough to meet Deep Cayley and see the current exhibition at Without Shape, Without Form. I know, Slough is not exactly the first place you'd think of to go to for a contemporary art exhibition, but I was invited to come see Reflections, SANGAT and the Self, and I'm so glad that I got on that train. And not just because of the art itself, but because of how it made me actually do things rather than just look at them. So first off, getting to Slough is way easier than I thought. I just hopped on the fast train from Paddington and I was there in 20 minutes. Honestly, it's faster than half of my tube journeys across London. And there's something quite lovely about watching the city melt away into fields and little towns. The gallery itself is this huge, bright space with massive windows everywhere. On the day I went, it was sunny when I walked into the exhibition, but was pouring rain when I walked out. And I could actually feel the change in the atmosphere because of those huge windows. The show features works by Rue Dessous and Jasmine Creed, and it's curated by the artistic director Deep Cayley. But here's what hit me the moment I walked in. This isn't your typical white wall gallery where you politely walk around looking at things. Everything about how it's designed feels intentional. They've got these creative structures set up, holding paintings or mounted corkboards for smaller works, and installations that basically turn the whole space into something that you can actually engage with. And the language they use is very thoughtful. Instead of being given an exhibition text that honestly reads like a press release, you are, quote, invited to pause, engage, and consider your own sense of self through community, daily practice, and the quiet power of reflection, which honestly already sets a completely different tone. So here's the thing that makes this exhibition completely different, in my opinion. It's built around these three Sikh concepts: Simran, Shabad, and SANGAT. But instead of just explaining what these mean on a wall label and teaching us about it in a didactic way, they actually get you to experience them. Take Simran, for example, that's focused practice, meditation. There are these colorful wooden sculptural forms that look like they were mounted on a purpose-built freestanding wall, and there's this gentle instruction that says, focus, form, repeat. The text by the work guides you through how you can engage with these wooden pieces. When anxiety or restlessness arises, it's recommended to try repeating a 2-syllable word, such as Waheguru, which in Sikh references a god. Then you can use the wooden shapes, which were actually magnetic, to create a design, letting your hands move while your mind settles. Even the word Waheguru is broken down phonetically for you. It's not academic, It's like, here, try this, see how it feels. This is what this show is about. Now, this is where things got really interesting for me. There's this installation by Rue Dessous, one of the artists, where you can actually lie down. And I'm not gonna lie, I was a bit hesitant at first. You know how it is in galleries, you're always worried about doing the wrong thing. Even as someone who's been in the sector for 8 years, I still sometimes overthink things. Is it a bench or is it art? But these were manjis, which are traditional South Asian woven beds. I saw these kids just playing freely on the woven seating areas, completely unbothered, and their joy kind of gave me permission to try it. And at this point, I should say that everyone working at Without Shape, Without Form is very, very welcoming and helpful. So there was also always someone nearby that I could ask in case something wasn't clear. So I lay down, and suddenly I'm looking up at these painted panels showing sky and clouds and sun. but it's kind of all geometric. Like the actual shapes of the planks that the paintings were on were triangular. And it's the complete opposite of how we'd normally picture like fluffy organic clouds. And as I tilted my head while laying down, I realized also I'm surrounded by these massive windows showing the actual sky outside. So you've got this artificial painted sky above you and real nature all around you. And I have to say, like, my first thought was that it's kind of like being in The Truman Show, if anybody's seen that movie. It's with Jim Carrey. It's really good. And so it did evoke some eerie thoughts in me. Maybe it's because of all the media I consume on a daily basis that caused my mind to jump to artificiality and the loss of nature when seeing these painted wooden geometric panels. It was an important thought that may have gone unnoticed or unprocessed within my own mind, but laying there thinking about all of this guided me to realize where some of my anxieties are actually rooted, which in turn may allow me to figure out how to deal with them in healthier ways. I felt a connection to the Sikh concepts of Simran, Shabad, and SANGAT in this work. By literally changing your physical perspective, it changes how you're listening, how you're seeing, how you're just being in the moment. This is also where I began to see Jasmine Creed's work in a different light. Her paintings and drawings were exhibited throughout the exhibition as well, and it was after I lied down on the manji by Rue Dessous and took a moment to reflect that I really began to understand what Jasmine was painting. She creates everyday scenes and urban environments. What immediately became apparent was, number one, the multiculturalism in her scenes, as well as these feelings that are connected to Sangat, the Sikh concept of gathering and fellowship. But often, in my opinion, her paintings were showing the absence of it. Two of the paintings that stayed with me in my mind were the ones of people on the tube, like really relatable to my everyday life. And you can feel the loneliness, the isolation, even when in a crowd, that one can often feel when living in these big, bustling cities. So then there's this installation called the Whisper Box. And honestly, this is where I had to confront some uncomfortable truths about myself. The idea is simple. You sit in silence for 1 minute and then record 3 minutes talking about what you discovered in your silence. Well, let me tell you, I completely fumbled the technology. I kept pressing the wrong buttons, accidentally stopping recordings before they started, then the tech glitched out a bit, just making a complete mess of it. But you know what? Maybe that was exactly what needed to happen. Because sitting in that minute of silence, especially knowing I was going to have to talk about it afterward, I realized how anxious I get about performing, about sounding intellectual enough, articulate enough, and scared of being vulnerable by sharing my true thoughts and feelings. Vulnerability is something I really struggle with. I'm always worried about judgment and not trusting myself fully, about regretting what I've shared later on. Honestly, this work was like a mirror, and it was held up to me to show me not just how I engage with art, but it was also a reflection of how I move through life. The third concept, Sangat, gathering and fellowship, which I mentioned earlier, was also present in not only the art, but also the staff members who immediately welcomed me in the gallery spaces, taking time to introduce the exhibition and show me where to find information. Or with those kids I mentioned earlier on the manjis, whose playfulness gave me permission to engage differently. The exhibition creates these little moments where you pause together, consider together, experience together. There's even this example with a placeholder. One of Rue Dessous' pieces, called Heal Home, is currently at the London Design Festival. But instead of just having empty space, the team have put up this wooden frame showing where it will be when it arrives in October. In my opinion, it's like a promise to the community that this is a living, evolving space. We're so used to art being this thing that we consume. Walk in, look, maybe read a label, and move on. But this exhibition completely flips that script. You don't just learn about meditation, you meditate. You don't just read about community, you experience it. You don't just observe reflection, you actually reflect. It's like the difference between reading a recipe and actually cooking the meal, you know? And in our world of constant stimulation and endless scrolling, which I can personally say really exhausts me, there's something sort of radical about a space that says, hey, just stop for a minute, be present, be with yourself and with others. If you're thinking of going, the exhibition runs until May 2026, so you've got loads of time. From Slough Station, it's a short bus ride or a 30-minute walk, or it's about a 20-minute walk from Burnham on the Elizabeth line. And honestly, I would really just implore you to go. This isn't one of those shows that you see and forget about. It's an experience that stays with you, that changes how you think about what art can do and what galleries can be. As I was moving on from the exhibition to go and sit down with Deep, I realized that something had shifted. The concepts of Simran, Shabad, and SANGAT weren't abstract ideas anymore. They were things I had actually done, felt, experienced. And that's pretty powerful. An exhibition that doesn't just show you art, but it gives you the tools, practices, ways of being that you can take with you. I define it more as culture than fine art, which I know are pretty two subjective terms to a certain extent, but this just takes a broader approach, which is why, upon reflection, I'm making that sort of linguistic distinction. Anyway, that's my take on Reflections, Sangat and the Self. And now, on to the interview I had with Deep Cayley. Deep is a visionary cultural narrator and the artistic director of Without Shape, Without Form. With a progressive, forward-thinking approach to storytelling, she's captivated audiences worldwide. Through exhibitions, editorials, films, and brand development, Deep creates visual languages that resonate. She has worked as a former fashion director of Tatler UK and fashion editor of Vogue India in London, gaining extensive experience in publishing, design, art, culture, and the luxury market sector. Without Shape, Without Form is an arts organization rooted in Sikh philosophical concepts. And as artistic director, she heads a contemporary artistic program, enabling people to have a meaningful conversation about the mind. Deep plays both a strategic and creative role in establishing Without Shape, Without Form as the UK's leading contemporary spiritual art space dedicated to mind well-being, working collaboratively with a network of partners nationally and internationally. I first want to talk about this location. Mm-hmm. You know, Without Shape, Without Form is returning home to Slough after a major redevelopment. So, number one, why Slough? And number two, what are your thoughts on running a space outside of the hustle and bustle of the cultural capital that is London?
I guess it goes back to 2017 when we were afforded the opportunity, actually in the space that we're sitting in today, just to do a show. At that time, that exhibition was called Without Shape, Without Form. The exhibition was called Without Shape, Without Form. And it was only meant to be on for about 2 weeks. I think 15 days is what was agreed. And that exhibition in November 2017 opened on a really, really miserable Saturday afternoon, like apocalyptic weather. I'm not, you know, I know us being British are supposed to always talk about the weather, but genuinely it was so dark. But all I can say was that at 2:00 when we opened, the car park, or the cars waiting to get in, the lines were insane. And that day, in span of like 3 hours, 4,000 people had come through. And we're talking 2017. So that's 8 years ago. So I think there was one Facebook message that had gone out and one WhatsApp thing. It wasn't like huge marketing. It wasn't billboards, wasn't Instagram, wasn't SEOs, wasn't any of that stuff. It was just that.
2025 could never.
And all that indicated to us very quickly was that there was a thirst, a need for these stories about the mind to be told in innovative ways. And that's really how it kind of came about. And that one exhibition that was only meant to be on for 15 days stayed for up until about a month ago. So for 8 years it was here. So coming back round to you asking about Slough, so the 15 days that we were supposed to be here, it was just the way that the audience flocked to the space that really indicated that actually it doesn't matter where you are. It's more important what you're talking about. There are people everywhere, irrespective of whether you're in a town, a city, a village, whatever it is. And then this space, like, look how much of it we have. We have 7,500 square feet space. Where are we going to get that? In London.
And what was the process like, bridging that time while redoing the space, renovations were underway, while also contributing to planning this new space, thinking about what the future is and how to program it anew? What was your approach like while you were touring and thinking about the future of Without Shape, Without Form?
Great question. Probably multi-layered. I think because Without Shape, Without Form is made up of about 57 people, of which five of us are full-time. Then we have probably about 15 to 20 that are very much part-time. And then the 57 get pulled upon when you're in the middle of a refurb and an installation. But everybody is a sevadar. Sevadar is a very specific word that describes somebody who gives back, practices the concept of giving back unconditionally. You could, in inverted commas, call that a volunteer, but we much prefer to use the word as it is, because sometimes a volunteer kind of doesn't do it justice. And the reason why we do what we do is because the thing that we talk about in any of our encounters has utterly transformed our own lives. So naturally, when one's mind starts to become in their own control, you can't help but give back. It's a natural byproduct of it. So when you ask me about what was the process of potentially programming, how are we thinking about the future of it? So my own background, I come from a creative background 100%, but not necessarily a direct arts background. I come from a fashion background. So when we realized that the art timeline or cycles are very different to other cycles, for example, it can take up to 2 to 3 years to put on an exhibition. Those timelines for some reason didn't work for us, because I was like, 2-3 years time, who knows what's going to be happening in that time? Like, things need to move a little bit quicker. And the reason why I give you the context of the amount of people that are involved, what that allows us to do is to move really in an agile and speedy way. So Journey of the Mind was an exhibition that was born within 4 months, and within 9 months it was touring. It was fully made, designed, made, interpretations done, locations locked in, and we were touring. At that time, we also used the fact that everyone's schedules were slightly messed up, because it was 2020, 2021, everyone's schedules. So we used that, and it's a disruptive exhibition model as well, because we're only showing it for 21 days wherever we went. It wasn't for 3 months, 6 months. So where we had already experimented working with major partners in the UK, we knew what it took to be slightly disruptive and do things slightly alternatively. Not only is the subject matter we're talking about alternative, but the process of making an exhibition can be alternative as well. All that said, so our process is one of agility and flexibility, and we have 3 cadences. And because I come from an extensive fashion background, I'm going to give you an analogy which is very fashion related.
I don't mind.
So this is how we approach it. Exhibitions are like couture, so not meaning expensive. I mean, they can be expensive.
If you think about shipping costs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We should know with this tapestry behind us. What that means is the exhibition happens once a year, once every other year, and it's limited to the place, the location. So in that sense, it's not readily accessible that anybody can come to it. But for example, here you have to come to Slough to see it, which is fine, because I think you have a very different experience when you physically come to any gallery space, which is important. Yeah. That's okay. So then the second pace that we had, but then we were like, that speed's not okay for us. We need to be faster as well. So then what are we doing on a monthly basis? And that's where we have our events, our workshops. We've got some really fantastic talks that we do, creative mind workshops. Those happen like ready to wear. They're slightly more available, but they happen on a monthly, weekly basis. And now what we're working on is also an editorial platform, which is your basic jeans and white t-shirt type of situation, which we'll start working on those on a daily basis. You should be able to get information, knowledge from us more regularly and not have to wait for 2 years. So because we have got these 3 cadences within the organization, it means that while we're doing refurb, while we're doing a rebrand, there's enough to be getting on with.
Yeah, I find that really interesting and also inspiring for anyone who, either if someone's at the helm of a cultural institution or if someone wants to start their own project, in how to think creatively on how to have those different cadences. Because I do think that very often we hear about this sort of typical complaint, maybe I would say, about the art world, that in institutional circles, it moves very slowly. It's very bureaucratic. It also happens to be a result of maybe, the fact that it's connected to government funding and having to go through long, more arduous processes to get that funding, for example. But I have worked mostly in the commercial art world, and so I'm very used to an incredibly fast pace all the time. And so it's very interesting to hear how you guys are approaching this in a very different way in order to have all of those different options, those different, I really love how you say, those different cadences, in order to be able to remain agile, but also taking time to stay true to contemplate, reflect on what your next steps will be as well, without feeling rushed into something.
Completely. But what we do within that strategy is make sure that there's enough space for flexibility and agility, because we didn't know that the things that we know were going to happen. The beautiful thing about having a team set up the way it does, which is rooted in contemporary Sikh philosophy and concept, is that if an opportunity presents itself, you don't sit on it for 2 years. You move, because you don't know what's going to happen next year. You don't know how times are going to change. And that's just fundamentally the way that we operate. So yes, we have, even now with the 3 cadences I've mentioned to you, they're going to try and test it. If one works, it works. And if it doesn't, we're flexible enough to try something else.
And what you just mentioned is that the artistic program is rooted in Sikh philosophical concepts. And I want to ask you about how that manifests.
I would like to think, and you can probably answer this better than I can, because I'm in it, I'm too close to it.
Yeah.
I would like to think it manifests in absolutely everything that you encounter with us. So whether that's just encountering our branding, whether it's encountering an exhibition, or it's meeting us as well, and the way that we speak, the way that we meet each other, that at the core of Sikhi is the ability that Sikhi manifests itself in the way that we speak, in the way that we sit, in the way that we are, in the way that we endure, and then in the way that we express. So, for example, in Reflection, Sangat and the Self, the core principle of that exhibition is healing. And this idea that healing happens within, that the mind suffers because it's taking thoughts it doesn't need to take. And we live in a world where we accept that as a way of being. And Sikh teachings tell us that your mind can come in your own control. It can be centered and it can be connected, and teaches us how to do it. So some of us are fortunate enough that we've been doing it for long enough that now we're talking about it. And therefore, if the problem is within you, the healing is also, the ability to heal, the medicine is also within you. So that exhibition directly is talking about Sikh concepts and Sikh philosophies and Sikh ways of being. But when you meet us in the car park, when you've just entered the site, you haven't even entered the building, hopefully the way that that person greets you makes you feel welcome here. Sikhi should come through that. You and I speaking here today, it should come through this conversation. So hopefully it manifests in every touch point. It's not just in the practice. Sikhi goes beyond any understanding that preconceived ideas that we might already have of it. It's something that is very, very deeply embodied. And to be a Sikh, by the way, the actual definition of the word is to be a learner.
And I would like to hear more about this, I guess I could say inaugural exhibition, because the inaugural exhibition is opening this space after the refurbishments, but Reflections, Sangat and the Self. And I understand that this is being shown here until May 2026. So this is one of those slower cadences where people have a long time to be able to come and see this exhibition, which I think is really great because, you know, I would definitely urge people to come from London out to Slough to see it. But I want to hear a little bit more about that because, you know, as I was going through the exhibition and thinking about what I was going to say in this exhibition review and how I was going to talk about it, one of the things that I mentioned was that the people who are here are so welcoming. And that is something that I think a lot of people would really wish for in spaces where art is being shown, where you're being invited to reflect, to be introspective. It does need to be a bit of a safer space in order to feel comfortable doing that. I was actively invited to not only learn about reflection, learn about taking space for my own mind, my own thoughts to wander or to feel more central, actually not to wander when I think about the whisper box. I'm not only invited to learn more about it or to think more about it, I'm invited to actually practice it within this exhibition. So I'd love to hear more about the thoughts of this basically duo show of the two artists and how that's come together.
I mean, I think you've summed it up beautifully. That's it. That's exactly what it should be. I guess it's multi-layered because, you know, at the end of the day, when talking to both of the artists, when commissioning them as well, I wanted the contrast of these two artists. One that only talks about paintings, and when you speak to Jasmir, her way of communication is paintings. I mean, as in verbally as well. Like when she tells you something, she'll tell it to you in reference to painting. So very quickly I realized for her, you know, that was her language. That's the way she speaks and what have you. And for Rue, all her work is rooted in community, this idea of bringing people together. What is Without Shape, Without Form's role in this? Because one thing that we don't do, we are very considered in the way that we communicate through art, and art is a language for us. I could actually explain to you how I personally feel that Sikhi is an art. It's a way of being, it's a way of expressing, as I've said to you before. It in itself is an art form. But how do you actually do that through the medium of painting or installations or sculptures and what have you? So when I sit down with any artist, but specifically these two, I make it quite clear that there's something else that's going on here as well. It's not just here's your paintings and here's your munji, your sculptures, your interactive pieces. That people need. Why do we do anything that we do without shape, without form? It's because it's got to impact people. People are going to come and see it. It's not. I'm not here to just showcase beautiful objects. Objects have to be active. Even if you're just looking, they have to do something for you. And what I mean by that is not just pose more questions upon questions. They also need to be able to deliver some answers as well. So in conversation, and both the artists were like, yeah, we're in. And therefore you sort of see Without Shape, Without Form interjects, in this case, almost like a third artist with the whisper box, as you mentioned, or focus, form and repeat, which invites you to practice Simran, the focus practice for the mind, while creating artwork. And that was really important for us, that the learning element of the exhibition isn't happening outside of the gallery space, it's happening within it.
And Deep, I have one final question for you, and it's a bit more of a broad question in relation to you as artistic director and this project. Of course, in true form with the All About Art podcast, which is where, you know, I want to talk about careers in the arts. Yeah. What is something that you've learned in your position that you can share with aspiring arts professionals embarking on their careers today?
To honestly be fearless and not get yourself stuck into a position where we're so worried about our job titles that we're not true to the thing that we're trying to do. And that's I'm bringing that from my previous career into this one as well, that kind of learning, that experience. One thing I've realized is that as somebody who trained in a creative profession, and I worked for magazines for many years. I started as an intern and an assistant to junior editor, worked my way up to directorship. And for 20 years, just under 20 years in that career, I felt like an imposter, even though I did it the right way. I didn't just come in. And then I've been doing this in this role for 4 years, and nobody can tell me that I'm not exactly where I should be. And I'm saying that very specifically to Without Shape, Without Form. I'm not sure if I was, the artistic director of the MoMA, I might
you might feel differently.
I might feel differently. But it's because the reason why I want to say that is I never want to be so disrespectful to anybody that has trained in the roles that they have and they've got to the levels. And I'm very, very conscious of being respectful to the fact that, yes, I'm not your average curator or your average artistic director, but also I'm not trying to be.
Yeah, because you don't have an art history background.
I don't have an art history background. Yes, I've always been in the arts. I've always, it's been my passion. It's the thing that I wanted to do. It's the thing that I didn't do. But therefore, I do it our way in this space. But I'm also conscious, and I'm saying this off the back of a panel discussion that I was on earlier this week, talking about the importance of London and London creativity. It was very specific from London Fashion Week angle. And one thing that I've learned from working in multiple industries is that fear sets in really quickly when we're trying to hold on to our job roles, and therefore it lacks innovation. That's what I love about what we do here, because we're just being true to who we are. And we're doing it. One thing I've always been, my speciality has always been, I can take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and create something. No one's creating anything new, by the way. No one's doing anything so brand new that hasn't already been thought of. It's about how you put the things together and create newness. And in this space, especially here in Slough, we're not a contemporary art gallery. We're also not a museum either. We don't have artifacts here in that same way. But maybe we're an art museum, because there is a huge element of education here. It's not a commercial gallery. Yeah. We're also not selling either. So to create that newness requires innovation. And so, to answer your question, to be fearless, to really know what your purpose is on what you're trying to achieve, and then if you can, try and work without ego. And I say if you can. The thing is, ego doesn't go unless you actually actively practice, for example, in my case, Simran.
Yeah.
And because then you eliminate the thoughts. One can't practice, you can't wake up in the morning and hope that today I won't have an ego. Ego will creep in. So Simran is the kind of thing that eliminates ego. And when that ego goes, what ends up happening is you realize that you're doing something that is beyond you and it's bigger than you. And therefore, what I do in the role that I'm doing is I'm not trying to leave a personal legacy. The legacy is going to be left by the work that we collectively do and in the knowledge that we're trying to share. Now, if you can wrap that up and put that into a workplace, into a work environment, whether those are magazines, whether those are our institutions, whether those are into our organizations, then how would any of those run if people don't, if they were ran without ego?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Deep. That was incredibly enlightening. And thank you so much for sitting down with me today and giving me this little interview.
Thank you for having me.
And that is it for today on All About Art. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a rating or a review, as it helps more people discover the show. Also, feel free to share with your friends, or if you share on social media, tag me and get in touch. Thank you so much for listening.